Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well this morning. Hope you'll bear with me. This is the first time that I have had to do this on video camera, and just like Todd said last week, it's a little strange talking just to a camera and not having any faces or bodies to talk to, but hopefully we'll get through it. I won't stumble too much, but hopefully we'll get the message across. This message this week is good. I really enjoyed studying it. We're continuing in our quarterly Transforming Truths. Todd spoke last week on the power to succeed. Today's lesson is lesson 4, talking about your flesh and its funeral. So we'll jump right into it. The lesson talked about, or gave a little illustration to begin with. I don't know if many of you remember, I know I don't, but in 1982 there was a story. There was a group of individuals that were planning a sailing or boating expedition. 5 of these individuals, they got together and they were going to sail from New York down to Florida, just down the East Coast. They got together, they checked the weather and everything before they started their sail. Everything looked good, so they started their voyage, got in their yacht, started to sail down the East Coast, 5 individuals. Now 2 days into this voyage, they started to experience some pretty rough weather. The waves started to pick up pretty bad. There was high winds. And these 2 individuals, Brad and Deborah, 2 of the 5, they were standing watch. They were keeping a watchful eye on the storm, trying to keep the boat close to shore, close to where they needed to be, and going in the right direction. And they were doing that for quite a while. The other 3 were just, I guess, having a good time and drinking and not really paying much attention. After a while, the other 3 came up and said, hey, we're okay. We can do this. We can watch. We'll give you a little bit of rest. So Brad and Deborah, they both went and took a rest or tried to get some sleep from being up all the time, and the other 3 took over. Well, Brad and Deborah, they were awakened by the boat filling up with water. The boat was sinking, and when they woke up, they found out that the other 2 or the other 3 had fallen asleep on their watch, and the boat had drifted further out to sea into rougher weather. So they were awoken. There was nothing they could do. The ship was going down. So they all 5 of them got into a raft. They got off the boat, and they started to drift away. They were in their little raft. Within a couple of days, the 3 others, they didn't make it. I don't know if they had sustained some injuries or just were not fit or able to get through that, but they did not make it but a couple of days out there drifting on the raft. Brad and Deborah, a few days later on, they were eventually picked up by a boat and rescued and brought to safety, and they lived to tell the story of their this accident, this issue where they drifted too far out into the storm. They did not, some of the crew did not pay attention. And this example, this illustration is very similar to what we as Christians have to be careful about. In our Christian walk, every day we struggle not to drift away from Christ, not to drift away from our Christian walk. If you look in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, it says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour." We have to be vigilant in our Christian walk every day. The pastors talked about messages, and a lot of the things that we've learned over the past months, are all tied into this. Every day we need to be vigilant in our Christian walk, sanctifying ourselves. Drifting away, whether it's a sailing boat or in our Christian walk, it's dangerous. And there's 2 things to note or to point out in here. The drifting, it's often gradual. It doesn't just happen, boom, all at one time. It's usually just a very gradual drifting. It's also often not noticeable to the person drifting. You can be, drifting away. You can sometimes, if you're at the coast or beach or whatever, or the pool, and you're in a raft, just kind of relaxing. You don't realize sometimes that you're drifting away, and you can be pretty far from the shore before you even know it. It's gradual, and you hardly even notice it. And that can be dangerous in our Christian walk. We never plan to drift. We never plan to fail in our decisions in our daily walk with Christ, but it's just human nature. It's something that we're going to continually have to deal with or have to battle. 1 Peter 5:8, Galatians 2:20 is our verse for this week. It says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. We must do this daily. We must be crucified with Christ daily. The preacher has made the comment about sanctifying ourselves daily. It is a daily activity that we need to do as Christians to maintain our Christian walk, our relationship with Christ. So today's lesson, the title is Your Flesh Funeral. It's talking about a funeral of our flesh. We're constantly dealing or battling with what our flesh wants. Even though we're saved, we still have that battle that we have to deal with. So we'll look at a few points about this funeral of the flesh. So first it is a personal funeral. Christ's death for you is your personal salvation, is a personal walk, personal relationship with Christ. Your death with Christ is your sanctification. It sets you apart. We identify with Christ daily through choosing to allow Christ to live through us. Like every day, we got to start out the day making our minds up, praying and having that talk, having that relationship with Christ, and having Him live through us, putting our flesh, our desires aside, and having that personal relationship with Christ. That's what it's about, personal. It's also a painful funeral that they're describing here in this lesson. In Galatians 2:20 that we just talked about, Paul uses the word crucify. He doesn't just say a death, but he uses the word crucify, which implies pain. It implies agony. Most people, if you think about it, if you think about yourself, most people are more afraid of how they will die rather than death itself. Think about how you're going to go. How is it going to be painful? Am I going to experience this? Most people are afraid more of how rather than death itself. Being crucified with Christ involves surrendering our flesh's desire. That's not easy. Our flesh is always there. It's always driving. It's always pushing, always wanting us to do certain things. So it's not easy. Our flesh tries to convince us that we need fear, that we need anger or lust or envy or pride to live in our heart. It's things that we're constantly battling. You remember messages from the pastor talking about a lot of these things that we deal with, that we battle with, and he's been, I've enjoyed those messages because it points out that how we normally just think about fear or or pride. He's digging deeper. We all deal with those things, and we have to battle that. It's not easy. All these things have been taught or brought to light. We've been going through in the pastor's messages, fighting with our flesh, battling with that. Paul, in his words, he admitted that his flesh fought against him. He had trouble with. If you look at Romans chapter 7, Romans chapter 7, verses 18 through 25, it It says, "For I know that in me, that is, in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. For to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good I find not. For the good that I will I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do. Now if I do that I would not, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. I find then a law, that when I would do good, evil is present within me. For I delight in the law of God after the inward man, but I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, with the mind I myself serve the law of God, but with the flesh the law of sin." It's a constant struggle. We have to deal with our flesh. It's something that we're constantly going to battle with, and as long as we're in this body, it is something that we deal with, but God is there to help. Further on in Romans 8, verse 18, he goes on to say, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." That's talking about, yes, we're going to struggle. We're going to have these things that we deal with and these battles, but those are nothing compared to the glory, to what we're working toward, to being with Christ. Nothing compares. No amount of strife or battle will overshadow that. And that's, Paul's words there. We may not experience, think about being in America, we may not experience the same level of suffering as that of Paul or even other Christians around the world today, but we will have challenges and sufferings. And, who knows, things are changing so quick, even here in America. What once we enjoyed, we were able to do without, worrying about it, now is becoming more of a question. We may have to endure some of the things that Paul did in our lifetime. If we're not careful, things are headed in that direction. So we will have struggles with flesh, with the world, with things around us. We will always have that. But we must count it a privilege that we are identified with Christ. If we are suffering because of us living for Christ and striving to do that for Christ, count it a blessing. The other thing that we look at, or that points out in this funeral of the flesh, that it's a powerful funeral. Romans chapter 6, verses 8 through 11, says, "Now if we be dead with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him, knowing that Christ, being raised from the dead, dieth no more. Death hath no more dominion over him. For in that he died unto sin once, but in that he liveth unto God. Likewise reckon ye also yourselves to be dead indeed unto sin, but alive unto God through Jesus Christ our Lord. Let not sin therefore reign in your mortal body, that ye should obey it in the lust thereof." So you're alive. This funeral is kind of weird. It's talking about a funeral or death, but you're also alive. You're putting the flesh away so that we can live a better life. You're also free. Chapter 6 of Romans, verses 16 through 18 goes on. It says, "Know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom ye obey, whether of sin unto death or of obedience unto righteousness. But God be thanked that ye were the servants of sin, but ye have obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered unto you. Being then made free from sin, ye became the servants of righteousness." You're free. We don't have to constantly be under the chains of that flesh, that sin. We have freedom now. Yes, we have to struggle with things on a daily basis, but because of our salvation, we have the freedom. And this funeral, as we look at it further, it's a practical funeral. Practical, what does that mean? It means that it should be fairly straightforward to implement, to put in our daily walk. Let's look at here. It says the first point, you die to your old lust of any sinful longing. You know, a lot of people look at lust or hear the word lust and you think of, sensual or something like that. But lust doesn't always mean sensual. Lust can be anything that we strongly desire. You think about the phrase lust for power, lust for money. Lust, it's anything that really captivates our attention, that it draws our desires other than God. Anything that draws us away from God is a lust for something else. What causes us to drift from God are these lusts, these desires, what we're wanting. Those things take up our time, take up our attention, and draws us further away from God, causes us to drift. Just like the ship in the example at the beginning. If you're not paying attention, or you're not watching the storm, you're not watching the shore, you're not staying in the right path, you're going to drift further away. What is occupying our mind and taking us away from God? What are the things that we have to deal with? What are our lusts? It's not big things. And as I mentioned at the beginning, that drifting is sometimes gradual. You don't even realize it sometimes. These things, these lusts, these things that take us away from our Christian walk, they don't have to be big things. They don't have to be anything, great. They can be small things as well that just draw our attention and they cause us to drift further away from Christ. Those are the things that we need to pay attention to, that we need to be aware of. It's to practically put it to put it into practice. Practical. You die to your old logic. Think about logic. I'm a very logical type person, I think. I'm very right brain thinking. I like math. I like to figure things out. I'm very logic oriented. But as Christians, a lot of times we will make decisions if we're trying to walk closer to Christ and trying to live the right Christian life. Our decisions and our logic will be considered foolish by the world. People will look at us and say, why did you make that decision? Why do you do that? An example of, someone may be offered a promotion at work. You say, this is a great opportunity to take this promotion, to move to another city, or to do this, or take on different roles. But as a Christian, we may choose to turn down that promotion because what's entailed in that promotion we know will pull us further away from God. So yes, the world looks at that and says, that's a great opportunity. Why did you turn it down? Why are you getting, turning away from that? And they just don't understand that that's not worth our relationship with Christ. We know it's going to pull us away. We may make a decision not to do that. Another example, someone that has a desire, has that call to go on the mission field, they may be called and make a choice to go to some foreign land that they've never been, may be very risky. They may have to endure hardships, and other people will look at that and say, why in the world would you make that decision? They don't have the understanding of Christians of our logic. The world will look at our decisions, look at our logic as foolish. If you look at Isaiah chapter 55, Isaiah 55 verses 14 and 15. Isaiah 55 verses 8 and 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. God has a plan. God, if we're having that Christian walk and walking closer with God and trying to follow His will for our life, His thoughts, His logic, His way of orchestrating things in our lives is beyond our understanding. It's beyond the people in this world, beyond their understanding. And no, we may not understand. We may not, agree sometimes with it. But how His thoughts, His understanding, His way of working everything out is beyond our understanding. But we have the faith that everything will work out, that He will work things out for us, that He is leading us in the right direction. We just need to stay close to Him. But the world will look at that and call it foolish. They're like, that we don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense. And it may not make sense in the short term here and there, but in our lifetime, in how God is orchestrating things, He makes it all make sense. The third thing about it being practical, you die to your old labor. You can't work your way into heaven, just like in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. It's not of our works. It's by the grace of God. Our salvation, going to heaven, is by grace. Nothing that we do can get us there. Nothing that we can't work our way and earn or anything or get His approval. It's not by works. Our flesh, though, it still desires to do works, to do things to get approval. I don't know if a lot of people, you may identify with this. I know sometimes I find myself doing this. It's like I want to do really good at this, this project at work, or really figure out this problem and get that approval or that praise from someone else. That's your flesh. Your flesh constantly wants that approval and wants that praise from other people. And that's, if we're not careful, we'll find ourselves constantly trying to do works to get approval instead of doing it for the right reason. When we are crucified with Christ, we no longer have the burden of laboring for approval. We're crucified. We've accepted the salvation. We don't have to work for that. We don't have to work for that. God gives it to us freely. But our motivation for doing good works should simply be due to our love for Christ. It's not that we're not going to do works or that we're not going to come to church or do this. It's that our reason and our drive for doing good works should be simply because of our love and appreciation for Christ. Not because we want to attain approval, not because we want to earn our way into heaven or anything like that. Simply because we love Christ and we want to worship Him. We want to do well for Him simply because we love Him. That should be our motivation, our desire. Last of all, it's a permanent funeral. Think about our salvation, being crucified with Christ, accepting the salvation. It's permanent. Though daily we have to sanctify ourselves. We have to constantly work at our relationship with Christ, drawing closer, setting aside time, like Pastor has mentioned, set aside that time, not even saying something, but just listening, having that relationship with Christ, and getting closer to Him. But that our salvation is permanent. We're going, we're there, but we want to have a closer relationship. We want to grow closer to Him as we grow. That should be our desire. And just thinking about when we die to our flesh and identify with Christ's suffering, we have a greater appreciation for what He did for us. A lot of times I'm guilty of this, thinking about, it's hard to picture or imagine what Christ really did for our salvation. We can't put ourselves in His shoe or walk in His shoes and understand what He really did, what He went through. But the more that we crucify our flesh, that we sanctify ourselves, the closer that we become with Christ, the better appreciation we have for what He did for us, for our salvation. I don't think that we will ever fully grasp, fully understand what that is and how He endured those things for us, what He gave up to come here for us. We'll never fully understand this side of heaven, but we will have a greater appreciation for it the more that we crucify our flesh, the more that we identify with Christ and sanctify ourselves to Him. So I know that there was lesson a little rushed, a lot of information kind of there at the short period of time, but I really hope that you take a look at these verses, take a look at this lesson and really focus on sanctifying yourself, focusing on it every day. We got to work at our relationship with Christ, sanctifying ourselves and overcoming or battling with the flesh. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. It's always going to be there. But it's something we just got to be vigilant. We just got to keep running that race. So, but I hope you got something out of the lesson, and I hope that you enjoy your day today and enjoy the sermon that's coming up next.